Mehta, who is the lead investigator for Emory's Remdesivir clinical trial. He's going to be he'll be talking about the trial and also sharing perspective on the latest developments with the White House announcement that just happened earlier today. Dr. Mehta, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today and to talk about some emerging information from the NIH's adaptive COVID-19 trial of therapeutics, otherwise known as the ACT study. Today, Dr. Fauci and colleagues from the NIH released some data, which is preliminary data on the efficacy of remdesivir in a clinical trial that has just completed enrollment. Emory was one of the leading sites and the lead enrolling site of this study internationally. There were over 40 sites in the United States and over 75 sites throughout the world that contributed over 1,000 patients to this very important clinical trial. Today, we saw preliminary information that showed that remdesivir decreased the time that patients were ill and allowed patients to go home and recover more rapidly than patients that were treated with placebo and standard of care. This is an important development, and we do look forward to more data coming from the study to confirm these preliminary data. We hope and we believe that remdesivir is the first therapeutic, the first medication to show a positive effect on patients with COVID-19. We do know that many of our patients in the study and outside the study continue to get better because of the wonderful medical care that they were receiving from our healthcare teams, our nurses, our doctors, and all the other wonderful healthcare professionals in the hospital. We do hope and believe that remdesivir is allowing those patients with COVID-19 to recover more rapidly. We're looking forward to this continuing data to emerge from this trial that will allow us to know which patients are best treated with remdesivir and where they receive the best response. In addition, we do know that many patients with COVID-19 experience significant inflammation, and that inflammation leads to damage in their lungs and other parts of their body. The way that remdesivir works is it turns off the virus's ability to make more of itself and continue to build. However, sometimes with a COVID-19 infection, the inflammation continues to go on even after the virus goes away. So one of the really interesting and important aspects of this NIH adaptive clinical trial is that we'll continue to adapt the trial to the most recent information. And moving forward, we hope to look at medications that might change how the immune system responds to dampen down the inflammation while things like remdesivir turn off the virus. So we look forward to continuing to get data from our current trial, and also we look forward to participating in upcoming trials with the NIH to continue to further our knowledge of COVID-19 and importantly, continue to improve the care that we give patients with COVID-19 so we can get them home to their families more rapidly. Emory is engaged in research in COVID-19 on multiple areas. So right now we're talking about therapies or medications that we're giving to patients. We also have our drug discovery group who has developed a new drug, EIDD2801, which shows great promise in laboratory testing and has now entered phase 1 trials in the United Kingdom. We hope to see that data continue to evolve, and hopefully we can learn if that might be an additional medication we can use. In addition, Emory is participating in research to understand the antibodies that are developed in patients with COVID-19 to see, one, if those antibodies help protect them from future infections, but also to see if those antibodies from some donors may be used as a potential therapeutic for future patients. So we're very engaged on trying to understand those antibodies and how well they work for our patients down the road. In addition, we are trying to learn what factors and what tests can help us predict which patients are going to improve and which patients may continue to need intensive care. We have wonderful colleagues at the Emory Center for Critical Care Medicine who are developing these algorithms that really help us improve the conditions of our critically ill patients, but also predict what resources will be needed for particular patients. So I think in the coming weeks, we're going to have growing data coming out of Emory, coming out of Georgia, and collaborating with colleagues throughout the nation and throughout the world so that we can continue to improve the care that we provide to our COVID-19 patients and hopefully help dampen down the outbreak. One really important way that we can prevent this outbreak down the road is through vaccination. And as many of you have heard, Emory, and particularly the Emory Vaccine Center, led by Dr. Nadine Raphael and Evan Anderson, have a series of clinical trials for new vaccines against SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. So we have fully enrolled one of those studies, and we will be opening up additional vaccine studies in the near future. And we hope that knowledge will help us not only prevent future infections, but really understand how these infections can be prevented for future outbreaks. With that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions that I might be able to answer for any of you.
All right, we'll go ahead, Dr. Mehta, if you want to just, can you see the chat function there? Do you want to just go ahead and take the first question?
Sure.
Great.
So the clinical trial was led by the National Institutes of Health, John Beigel being the international principal investigator. I was the lead investigator at Emory University and at Grady Hospital, and we led the entire study in the number of patients enrolled. So combined through our Emory Healthcare Hospitals and Grady Memorial Hospital, we enrolled 103 out of the 1,066 patients in the entire global trial. The next question is, if an EUA is granted, how quickly do you think that Emory hospitals will start treating people with this drug? That's a very good question. Right now, we are launching the second phase of the ACT trial, so called ACT 2, which will look at Remdesivir plus a medicine that will modulate the immune system to help prevent that inflammatory damage. So we hope to have that trial open by the end of the week, and therefore we'll be able to treat patients with Remdesivir who qualify for the study starting at that point in time. As the FDA evaluates the drug Remdesivir, and again, the information that we have to date is only preliminary information of the first half of the patients that were enrolled in the trial. As we move forward, we'll get additional information that will not only be used by our clinicians, but also the FDA to see if they want to move this drug towards an EUA or to FDA approval. Once it does become approved, we will create an algorithm that will allow us to use it in all the patients that would be safe and effective to use it for. So we hope to do that very quickly. What are the side? So the next question from Bloomberg News is, what are the side effects of this drug? So one of the really important reasons we wanted to consider Remdesivir for COVID-19, beyond the knowledge that it had effects on coronaviruses, was that through the data we had in our trials in Ebola patients, we knew that the side effects were pretty minimal in patients, and they were easily reversed when the medication was stopped. So to date, we have seen, as been published by our colleagues at Gilead and our colleagues in China, a side effect profile that is very mild. We do see some patients develop increased liver enzymes, meaning that their liver is undergoing some stress from the medication. But we have seen all of our patients, once we stop Remdesivir or when they've completed the study, those increases in liver enzymes go away quite rapidly and before there's any damage to the liver. We have not seen any significant other side effects in the patients, but this is a really important part of the trial that will come out. we still don't have all the safety data reported from the NIH, and that will be critically important to understanding how we use this medicine in the future. The next question from USA Today is, do you believe the Wuhan study published in Lancet is useful, or was the data set too small? So our colleagues in China who just presented their data in the medical journal Lancet clearly indicated that they were not able to enroll enough patients into that study to meet statistical criteria to make any judgments. I do think that study is important because it did show some trends that we need to follow. And importantly, that there may be a potential that the earlier we use this medicine, Remdesivir, in a treatment course may have a better impact on the overall health of the patient. However, given that this study that was published didn't meet their enrollment targets, it's really hard to make broader judgments beyond some indications of the earlier treatment being better, and also, as they reported, there being very little safety concern. That is one of the great advantages of the NIH's ACT trial, is that it not only met the enrollment criteria that it needed, but it far exceeded that. And so therefore, we'll have a wealth of data in the coming weeks to really guide our understanding of the impact of Remdesivir beyond the preliminary data that was released by the NIH today. The next question is, how are Emory doctors working with doctors across the US and world to find vaccines that work? So as we are doing with our clinical care, we are collaborating and having ongoing discussions with colleagues here in the United States, as well as healthcare centers and public health agencies across the world, to make sure that we're communicating all the information that we're learning as rapidly as possible. And that's not only for the health care that we're delivering, but also for our vaccine studies. So Emory participates in multiple national and international vaccine networks so that we are working collaboratively as we develop these vaccines to really understand where they work and who best they work in, and importantly, how we can improve them moving forward. Next question is, do you believe Georgia is heading for a second wave of COVID-19? So I think we are all very interested in how the outbreak is going to progress here in the Metro area, Georgia, and in our nation in general. I think many of the measures of mitigation, such as social distancing, closing of schools, minimizing workplaces, have really improved our ability to flatten the curve and diminish the impact of the outbreak in Georgia. And importantly, it is that flattening of the curve has prevented our healthcare systems to date from becoming overwhelmed. I do think we need to be cautious and vigilant and make sure that we are monitoring what's going on in the community and be able to scale up and scale down these mitigation measures as necessary, as recommended by our public health experts, so that we can maintain a flattened curve and prevent our healthcare systems from becoming overwhelmed in the future. Should people, the next question is, should people interpret the results of this trial with regards to social distancing and stay-at-home orders? Can we go back to normal based off of these results? So I think that's a really important question. It is critical to understand that the trial that we're talking about right now is a treatment trial for moderately and severely ill individuals. Our goal as a medical community and as a public health community, and I think for everybody, is to prevent these infections from occurring and also prevent them from becoming, prevent patients from becoming sick enough to need to be in the hospital or to need ICU level care. And so I don't think that we should use this data to say that we can stop these mitigation measures, because the mitigation measures prevent infections and prevent healthcare systems from being overwhelmed. Medical therapies such as Remdesivir can only treat patients once they're moderately and severely ill, but we don't want to get to that point if we can prevent that. Okay, let me read the next question. What do you think will happen to people getting flu shots more regularly because of this outbreak? will this vaccine be available for all Americans? So I think that's two different questions. So one of, I think, the really important aspects of this outbreak that we hope will come out is really understanding the importance of infectious diseases and communicable diseases and the impact on our communities and our healthcare systems. And we have known for decades that vaccines are a very important part of preventing communicable diseases, preventing people from getting sick and preventing people from dying, but also in these sort of situations, preventing healthcare systems from becoming overwhelmed, communities from breaking down, and our economy from faltering. So I think preventive measures such as vaccines are critically important for all of these. And hopefully this unfortunate outbreak can bring that to national attention and the attention of each one of our households so that we stay focused on preventing these infections for the future. So the next question is, did patients studied have low, moderate, or severe cases? So this study, the NIH's Adaptive COVID-19 Trial Therapeutics, or ACT study, only included hospitalized patients. And patients had to meet certain severity criteria to be in the study. So they needed to either have a pneumonia that was demonstrated on X-ray or needed to be on oxygen supplementation in addition to being diagnosed with COVID-19 or be sicker, so be in the ICU or needing high amounts of oxygen support to qualify for the study. So this study did not include any patients that were treated as outpatients, meaning never needed requirements of being in the hospital. So we can only use the data from this trial to guide our care for those hospitalized patients with pneumonia or needing oxygen support. What do you tell families who hear, the next question is, what do you tell families who hear this news, have someone in the hospital with COVID-19? Is this a silver bullet? And in those patients who didn't respond, why did it not work? So these are very good, important questions. So I think it is very important to understand that remdesivir and antivirals in general are not silver bullets. They do not immediately get rid of an infection. They take time to work, and they work by slowly preventing the virus from making more of itself. However, there is already virus in the body when we start these medicines, and sometimes there's already damage done. There's already inflammation being produced that doesn't all go away when we get rid of the virus. So again, these antiviral medicines are part of the treatment, but we do many other things as part of our care in the hospital to support one's body, to help their immune system and help their organ systems recover from a COVID-19 infection beyond potential antiviral medication. So again, it's not a silver bullet. It is one additional tool to help us get our patients better, more rapidly, and get them home to their families more quickly. And then the second question is, what do we think about the patients in which it didn't work? This is also an important question. We know most medications work well in certain patients, but may not work the same in all patients. And so that's what we need to get from this NIH clinical trial. And again, we just have preliminary data at this point in time. So we need to wait for some of that data to mature to really understand in which patients this medication works well, and if additional medications or different medications may be required for other patients in which remdesivir alone may not sufficiently help improve the outcomes. So what is the next question is, what is the immune drug that's being added for remdesivir? So there's multiple drugs being, multiple medications in consideration as for the next phase, Act 2. And we should hear an update from the NIH very soon as to what medication that will be. Emory has been a thought leader in thinking about which of these immune modulators or drugs that dampen down the immune system should be included in the clinical trials. And we've presented our data through my colleague Vince Marconi at the Atlanta VA Hospital. to the NIH for consideration, and we do believe we will see an update to the study coming very soon. Next question is, can you give us any specifics about the results? What was the difference between Remdesivir, the Remdesivir group and the control group? So the data that was released by the NIH today is a preliminary analysis that was contributed by the Data Safety Monitoring Board in their ongoing evaluation of the trial. So again, very preliminary data, has not undergone the robust analysis that will be conducted by the statisticians and the scientists at the NIH in the coming weeks. But it was statistically significant and rigorous enough for the NIH to release today. What they showed in this preliminary analysis of a subset of patients, so not the full 1,000 patients, but a little over half the patients were evaluated. And it showed that the drug Remdesivir seemed to improve the time to recovery from an average of 15 days in patients that received the placebo to 11 days in patients that received the drug Remdesivir. And so that helps us shorten the time that the patient needs to be in the hospital and getting medical care, and then decreases the chance of them developing complications of their COVID-19 infection. We're also really interested in the data that Dr. Fauci discussed, that it may decrease the overall mortality of patients with COVID-19. But again, we need far more data to be able to make any of those judgments become concrete. We will get that data in the coming weeks. So can you talk about the key differences between the ACT trial and the Chinese study? So I think the main difference in the ACT trial and the Chinese, there are two main differences. The Chinese study was conducted in one country. The ACT trial was conducted in several countries across the world, and therefore included a very diverse population of humans, patients, that allowed us to really hopefully understand, again, in which patients this study, this drug may work well, and maybe some patients that it may not. We don't have that data yet, but we hope that data will be coming. But most importantly, this study, the ACT study, met its enrollment criteria, meaning it got the right number of patients into the study for our analyses to meet statistical significance. So once we have that final analysis, we'll have enough data and enough analysis to make the conclusions fairly concrete. And so we're waiting for that data to occur, but I think that is one of the great advantages of this study. And one of the reasons we're proud to be in the study is that we were able to enroll the number of patients needed to make good conclusions and produce good scientific data.
Dr. Mehta, can we go to the question, do the 1,063 patients in the trial? I want us to stick to questions related to the trial specifically, and we can follow up with anyone who's interested in other topics can follow up with us after the briefing.
Okay. So do the 1,063 patients in the trial represent only part of the full ACT trial or the full cohort? So the ACT-1 study, which completed enrollment, enrolled 1,063 patients, and that is the full cohort of the ACT-1 study. Now, the analysis that was presented today was not the analysis of the full 1,063 patients. It was an analysis of a little over half the patients that had met enough follow-up time for the DSMB, the Data Safety Monitoring Board, to analyze data. We are going to analyze data from all the patients as the weeks move on, so that, again, we'll have a much more robust data set to make really good, strong scientific conclusions from. So next question is about Remdesivir as a prophylaxis. So Remdesivir was only studied in the ACT trial as a treatment. To date, we don't have an active study of prophylaxis here in the United States. It may be something that's studied in the future, but not currently. Can you talk about, the next question is, can you talk about how remdesivir patients responded versus placebo in terms of recovery time and survival time? So one important thing that I forgot to mention right at the beginning is that we as investigators still are blinded as to which patients receive remdesivir and which patients receive placebo. So all we can tell you is the data all put together that was released by the NIH today. And again, the data would indicate that the recovery time was shorter in patients that were on remdesivir, and there may be some benefit in overall mortality with remdesivir. But again, these are preliminary data. We need to wait for the final data before making hard conclusions. So the next question is for the people who died on this trial who did not respond to remdesivir. Were there any pre-existing conditions, age, gender, etc.? So again, the data that we have from the NIH is very preliminary. We have not looked into the comorbidities or other risk factors for good or poor outcomes yet. That will come once we have the full data set to analyze, and we hope to have that data in the next few weeks. The next question is, what is the time frame for FDA approval? I would suggest that you refer that question to somebody from the FDA that could talk to about what the timeline is for drug approval, or the company that makes the medication. I'm going to skip over questions again that don't focus on the trial for now. Is it possible that when the full cohort is studied, that no statistical significant effect could be found? Or is the signal strong enough in the group of the patients that they analyzed? That's an excellent question. So the NIH felt that the data was robust enough that they could report the preliminary data, because they felt that as we got the full cohort, there was not a significant threat to that main conclusion that remdesivir seems to improve the recovery time of patients with COVID-19. We will look for the full data set to really understand how strong of an effect, how strong of an improvement in time to recovery that this drug helps our patients with COVID-19. It could be shorter, it could be longer, we don't know yet. There are multiple other analyses that we really need to do to help our clinicians understand how to use this drug and in whom to use it, that will only come once we have the full data set available. Next question is again talking about timelines to getting the drug available. Again, I would refer patients to our FDA or our FDA authorities. I'm not going to talk about any individual patients because one, I don't know what they received, and don't want to talk about any particular stories at this point. What was the quantitative difference in mortality observed in this data set? So the data that was reported by the NIH showed a difference of from 11% mortality in patients treated with placebo to approximately 8% mortality in patients that were treated with remdesivir. Again, we don't know what type of patients seem to have a higher mortality in either one of those groups, nor do we have enough data to know if that's a statistically significant difference yet or not. So again, more data to come and hopefully more knowledge to gain. So I think we've already talked about the mortality data. How does this tie into the Lancet report earlier showing statistical? Yeah. So again, the Lancet data, the group that published their data in Lancet, they were not able to enroll enough patients to complete their analysis. So it's difficult to make any judgments on their outcomes. I think they did show some really nice data showing that the medication was safe. And as the authors concluded, they would have needed more patients to make any concrete conclusions as to the benefit of remdesivir or not. Again, the advantage of the ACT trial is that we enrolled well over our needed number to make those analyses statistically significant. And so hopefully, as we get that analysis, we'll be able to provide really important data for our healthcare providers and our healthcare systems. Okay, I think we came to the end of the questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Mehta.
Of course.
We're going to conclude the briefing, and we will be sending out the recording within the next 15 minutes following the briefing, so you can take a look at that. If there's any follow-up questions, please direct them to Catherine Morrow, and we will try to get them answered. And specifically to those people who asked questions that were unrelated to the trial, we're happy to chase that information down for you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.